I took one strand of what is there on that mountain. You won't believe, in 2.5 hours, I was almost 10 to 15 years younger.
Mount Kailash is a legendary mountain peak located near two lakes called Manasarovar and Rakshastal. And according to ancient stories, this mountain is basically the apartment building of the gods, and no mere human is allowed to walk on top. Legends say anyone who tries to reach the peak will, well, let's just say they won't be posting vacation photos from heaven. So while it might be tempting to see if the gods have a rooftop pool, it's probably best to admire Kailash from a safe distance. So why is Mount Kailash an impossible mountain to climb?
That is the power of that mountain. It's not just to heal you of your health or something. It is tremendous amount of everything that one can know in the universe is stored there in some way.
Join us as we delve into details of how scientists found an ancient cave inside Mount Kailash in Tibet that defies all logic. Geographic and spiritual significance. Mount Kailash stands tall in Gari Prefecture, Tibet, a region nicknamed the Roof of the World. This remote area is known for its harsh, high-altitude desert terrain, a stark contrast to the lush valleys of Nepal nearby and the rolling plains of Central Asia further north. The mountain rises majestically above the Bara Plain, with the sacred lakes, Manasarovar and Rakshastal sparkling at its base. This creates a breathtaking and peaceful landscape, surrounded by some of the world's most impressive mountain ranges. Mount Kailash is part of the Trans-Himalayas, a lesser-known but equally dramatic mountain range compared to the Himalayas. This isolation has helped preserve the mountain's natural beauty and mystique, attracting pilgrims and adventurers for centuries. What makes Mount Kailash truly special is not just its stunning scenery, but also its deep spiritual significance. Climbing Mount Kailash is discouraged, not just for cultural reasons or government regulations. The mountain itself seems to have a sense of reverence. Unlike Mount Olympus in Greece, where the gods actively prevented humans from climbing, Mount Kailash stands apart, untouched by human conquest. Climbers who have approached the peak often describe a feeling of being in a sacred place, one that shouldn't be disturbed. The symmetrical pyramid shape of Mount Kailash has also puzzled geologists and scientists. Some have even speculated it might be a man-made structure, though science points to natural geological processes for its formation. Over in Maharashtra, India, the ancient hills aren't just sitting around looking pretty. They're covered in incredible temples and monasteries carved right into the rock. Out of these 34 amazing structures, the Kyasa Temple, Cave 16 for all you record keepers, is the undisputed champion. It is a giant, magnificent building, except it's not built. It's carved from a single rock. This wasn't some weekend project. It took the brilliant artisans of the 8th century under the Rashtrakutas to create this masterpiece. The Rashtrakutas ruled a huge chunk of India from the 6th to 10th centuries and loved to show off their love for art and culture. King Krishna I, who reigned from 756 to 774 CE, had a particularly grand vision: to build a temple that looked just like Mount Kailash, the legendary home of Lord Shiva in Hindu mythology. Construction techniques of the Kyasa Temple. Forget everything you know about building temples. The Kyasa Temple is the total opposite. Instead of stacking bricks from the ground up, this mind-blowing structure was carved straight out of a giant rock, top first. Ask anyone that knows anything about construction and they'll tell you how crazy this is. One mistake and the whole thing would have crumbled. Those ancient artisans were crazy skilled, carving the roof and then rappelling down bit by bit to create this massive temple. And speaking of massive, this temple is huge, twice the size of the Parthenon in Athens and nearly 100 feet tall. They must have moved like a mountain of rocks, well, 200,000 tons to be exact, to make this beast. Now let's talk about Mount Kailash. Picture a giant pyramid, with each side pointing exactly north, south, east, and west. Nature doesn't usually play by those rules, which is why this mountain is so darn interesting. The north face is the ultimate climbing challenge, a sheer cliff that would make even Spider-Man sweat. The south side is a bit friendlier, offering epic views from base camp. And the east and west faces complete the whole pyramid vibe, making it look like something out of another world. It's pretty darn cool. The fact that Mount Kailash lines up perfectly with north, south, east, and west also has everyone scratching their heads. Some folks say it's just a crazy twist of geology, while others think it's a sign that the mountain is super magical. Whatever the reason, this perfect alignment definitely makes it a super cool, natural wonder and a super holy place. Mount Kailash and its neighbors have a long and wild history. The mountain itself is mostly made up of granite and metamorphic rocks, some of the oldest on Earth. These rocks were smashed and baked millions of years ago deep underground. The granite is all chunky and sparkly, full of quartz, feldspar, and mica. And it's super tough. It's been through a lot and just keeps on standing tall. The metamorphic rocks show how much the area has changed over time. They've been twisted and squeezed into all sorts of shapes, adding to the mountain's rugged good looks. Around Mount Kailash, you'll find valleys carved by glaciers, giant piles of rocks left behind by ice, moraines, and sparkling lakes so high up they're practically touching the sky. Lakes Manasarovar and Rakshastal south of the mountain are some of the highest freshwater lakes in the world. With their clear water and peaceful vibes, they add to the whole spiritual and beautiful thing this whole area has going on. The ancient Indian civilization. India's history is seriously old school, over 5,000 years old. Back in the day, one of the coolest and longest-lasting civilizations popped up in the fertile Indus Valley, mostly where Pakistan is now, and some parts of northwest India. This area, with the Indus River snaking through it, was perfect for growing crops, so people started settling down and forming communities. Around 2600 BCE, things really got going, and this became what we call the Indus Valley Civilization, or the Harappan Civilization for short. This civilization was around the same time as famous ones in Mesopotamia and Egypt, but it had something special. The Indus Valley people were rock stars at planning cities. Their towns, like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, were laid out in neat grids with fancy drainage systems and impressive buildings, both public and private. Speaking of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, these were the shining stars of the Indus Valley. Imagine cities planned so well. The streets were like perfect squares, just like some cities today. Even the houses were awesome, built with baked bricks. Some even had indoor plumbing, which is pretty swanky even now. Mohenjo-daro's drainage system was insane. Every house was connected to a giant sewage system, showing how clean and organized they were. They even had a giant public bath, the Great Bath, which shows how important cleanliness and hanging out with their neighbors was to these ancient Indians. One of the biggest mysteries about the Indus Valley people is their writing. They left tons of scribbles on seals, pottery, and other stuff, but no one can figure out what they mean yet. It's like a code we can't crack. Imagine having a diary written in a secret language. Frustrating, right? But if we could decipher it, we might learn all sorts of cool stuff about their daily lives, their religion, and how they ran things. It would be like unlocking a secret history book. These Indus Valley folks were farmers first and foremost. They grew wheat, barley, and peas like crazy, thanks to all the fertile land around the Indus River. All that extra food meant their cities could grow bigger, and they even started trading with people in other places, maybe even Mesopotamia. Think ancient Iraq. They were also super skilled at making stuff, pottery, jewelry, you name it. Learning about these ancient civilizations helps us appreciate how cool and mysterious Mount Kailash is, and how far back human cleverness and spiritual beliefs go. It's all part of the big, amazing story of humanity, artifacts, and society of the Indus Valley civilization. These Harappan folks were seriously skilled. They dug up bronze, gold, and fancy stones to make all sorts of cool things, like jewelry. Their pottery game was on point too. They decorated it with awesome designs, showing their artistic side even in everyday things. We're not exactly sure how they ran their society, but it seems pretty chill. Unlike other civilizations around that time, they didn't build giant palaces or flashy tombs for their bigwigs. Even their houses all looked pretty similar, and nobody seemed to be buried with a ton of fancy stuff. This might mean they were more equal, like a big community instead of a bunch of rich and poor folks. Imagine living in a bustling Indus Valley city. They had giant warehouses to store all their food, so someone must have been in charge of keeping everyone fed, maybe even a kind of government. They also had public baths and wells, showing they cared about staying clean and healthy as a community. Religion was a big deal for them too, although we're not sure exactly what they believed. They left behind lots of little stamps, seals, with pictures of animals, monsters, and maybe even gods and goddesses. One famous seal shows a dude sitting all cross-legged with animals around him. Some folks think this might be an early version of the Hindu god Shiva. Pretty cool, huh? But it wasn't all work and religion. They like to have fun too. We found little clay figures, toys, and fancy beads showing they had a creative side. They probably had music, dancing, and maybe even plays to keep entertained. Who knows? Maybe even religious ceremonies involved some singing and dancing. Around 19,000 BCE, things started going downhill for the Indus Valley people. No one knows for sure why exactly, but some ideas are the weather got weird, the rivers changed their minds about where to flow, and maybe they just used up all the good stuff. Whatever the reason, their awesome cities slowly emptied out, and people scattered into smaller groups. But hey, that's how history rolls. One civilization fades and new ones pop up in their place. Even though their cities went extinct, the Indus Valley folks left a big mark on India. They basically set the blueprint for future Indian civilizations, showing them how to build cities, design buildings, and maybe even organize their society. Their religious beliefs and traditions also stuck around, adding to the amazing mix of cultures that make India so special today. Discovery of the Ellora Caves. The story of the discovery of the Ellora Caves is just as interesting as the history of the region. In 1819, back when British officers in India weren't busy all the time, they'd often head out on expeditions, exploring the wild Indian countryside for fun, and because, well, it was super interesting. It was on one of these adventures that Captain John Smith stumbled onto something incredible: the Ellora Caves. Now, Captain Smith wasn't exactly an Indiana Jones type. He was just a regular officer patrolling the land. But like many back then, he loved exploring India's beauty and mystery. One fateful day in 1819, he and his crew were out and about, not knowing they were about to make a history-changing discovery. They ventured deeper into the forested hills of Maharashtra, and things got pretty wild, thick undergrowth everywhere, untouched by humans for ages. Then, hidden in these rocky hills, Captain Smith and his crew spotted something amazing, an entrance to what looked like an ancient cave. Intrigued, they started clearing away the plants, and what emerged blew their minds. It wasn't just any cave, but a series of them carved right into the rock. These weren't your average caves, though. They were like works of art, filled with intricate carvings and sculptures. Captain Smith had just stumbled upon the Ellora Caves, a massive complex of rock-cut temples and monasteries built over hundreds of years, reflecting a mix of Buddhist, Hindu, and Jain traditions. One cave in particular stood out like a rock star, the Kyasa Temple, also known as Cave 16. Dedicated to Lord Shiva, this temple was unlike anything Smith had ever seen. Forget building it from the ground up. This one was carved from a giant rock, top down. The size and detail of this one giant structure were mind-boggling, making you wonder how skilled and creative the people who built it must have been. Now, in the excitement of this discovery, Captain John Smith did something that would leave its mark. Back then, explorers often did this. He carved his name and the date, 1819, on a pillar inside one of the caves, Cave 10. Today, we might see that as vandalism, but back then, it was like a way of saying, "I found this." While archaeologists wouldn't recommend it nowadays, Smith's inscription serves as a cool reminder of when the Ellora Caves were rediscovered by the world. The Ellora Caves are like a giant museum carved into a cliff, so big it's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. There are 34 caves in all, stretching over 2 kilometers, which is pretty darn long. Here's the cool part. These caves represent different religions, 12 for Buddhists, 17 for Hindus, and 5 for Jains. Each group decorated their caves in their own unique way, so there's a lot of variety to see. But the real showstopper is the Kyasa Temple. Built back in the 8th century by King Krishna I, talk about a cool name, this temple is like nothing you've ever seen. Imagine carving an entire temple not out of bricks, but out of a giant rock. That's exactly what they did. It took some serious planning and effort, like removing 200,000 tons of rock. But the result is incredible. The temple is massive, with all sorts of intricate carvings telling stories from Hindu mythology, especially about Lord Shiva. It's a true masterpiece, preservation and study of the Ellora Caves. This discovery really changed the game for understanding Indian history and culture. It showed off just how advanced ancient Indian civilization was, especially in terms of architecture, engineering, and art. The Kyasa Temple in particular blew everyone's minds, making people rethink what they knew about ancient societies. The level of skill and craftsmanship was seriously next level, almost like something out of a superhero movie. After Smith's find, there was a whole wave of people wanting to explore and document India's ancient sites. The Archaeological Survey of India, ASI, was set up in 1861 to really dig into these historical treasures. Early scholars and explorers like James Burgess and later Gulam Yazdani got into the nitty-gritty, writing up detailed reports and books that are still super important for understanding India's past. Fast forward to today, and the Ellora Caves are a major draw for visitors from all over the world. People just can't resist the historical and artistic significance of these caves. They really show off the smarts and dedication of the folks who made them, a real symbol of India's diverse cultural heritage. When you wander through those ancient halls and take in all the crazy carvings and the sheer size of the Kyasa Temple, it's hard not to think about Captain John Smith's wild, accidental adventure back in 1819. It's like a reminder of how cool history can be. Back in 1861, India realized its ancient sites needed some serious TLC, so they formed a special team, the Archaeological Survey of India, or ASI for short. Think of them as a bunch of history detectives, piecing together clues from the past to protect all of India's cool old stuff. They don't just dig things up, they also fix them up, keep them from falling apart, and even tell everyone how awesome they are. The Ellora Caves were a big challenge for the ASI. These weren't just dusty old caves. They were like amazing works of art, filled with intricate carvings and giant buildings. The ASI had to figure out how to keep them from crumbling and looking like, well, caves. They used all sorts of sciencey stuff to make sure the rocks stayed strong, the water didn't leak in, and all the carvings didn't get worn down by tourists, and time. One of the first ASI detectives on the Ellora case was James Burgess, a British archaeologist. Imagine him crawling around the caves with a notebook, sketching every detail and taking tons of pictures. His work in the 18,000s was super important. He created maps, took tons of photos, and wrote detailed reports. Basically, he made a giant instruction manual for future archaeologists. Burgess was super passionate about India's history, and he believed these caves weren't just old rocks, but pieces of a giant puzzle that told the story of India. Thanks to all his hard work, the Ellora Caves got the recognition they deserved, and everyone learned how cool they were. Contributions of Gulam Yazdani. Fast forward to the early 19,000s, and we meet Gulam Yazdani, an Indian archaeologist who became a superhero for the Ellora Caves. He wasn't just some dusty old researcher. This guy was like a skilled surgeon, carefully patching up the caves to make sure they lasted for ages. But Yazdani wasn't just about keeping them in good shape. He wanted everyone to appreciate how awesome they were. He did a ton of research and wrote detailed guides about the cave's art and architecture. He even included super close-up drawings and photos, so you could see all the crazy details in the carvings and sculptures. Mount Kailash is like a holy grail for 4 religions: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Bon. They all believe it's the center of the whole world, pretty darn important. Hindus think it's the home of Lord Shiva, a super powerful dude who chills on the mountaintop. Buddhists see it as the home of someone called Demchok, who's all about ultimate happiness. Jains believe it's where their most important guy reached enlightenment, and the Bon religion thinks it's the source of all spiritual power. No wonder thousands of pilgrims take a super tough trek every year to walk around the entire mountain. That's some serious dedication. Hiking around Mount Kailash is no walk in the park. Literally, it's 32 kilometers. But for many religions, it's a super important way to wipe your slate clean and earn a boatload of good karma. This trek is where hardcore faith meets some serious physical challenges. Pilgrims who embark on this sacred journey aren't just following a trail, they're following ancient traditions. Every step has a meaning, from walking clockwise around the mountain, because apparently that's lucky, to chanting special words to show respect. They say finishing this trek, called the Kora, is like a total soul cleanse, way more powerful than just saying sorry. For some folks, it's a way to thank the gods they believe in. For others, it's a chance to find themselves and ditch all the worldly stuff, stressing them out. It's more than just a religious thing. It's a test of how tough you are and how far you can push yourself. The air gets thin up there and the weather can be brutal, but the views, totally unreal. Think snow-capped mountains, ancient glaciers, and crystal-clear lakes. It's enough to make you feel super small and remind you how amazing nature is. Reverence and conservation. The Chinese government put a big no way on climbing Mount Kailash. They get why though. This ain't just any mountain, it's super holy ground. They want to keep it pristine for all the pilgrims who come to soak up the good vibes. For these folks, Kailash isn't just some rocks and snow. It's a place that makes you feel something deep down, a symbol of faith that's stronger than any border. Here's the crazy part. The weather around this mountain is wacky. It's like the normal rules don't apply. People have seen clouds doing flips and twirling around the peak like they're in some cosmic ballet. And that's not all. There have been stories of spooky lights dancing on the mountaintop, like a celestial light show. It's enough to make you wonder if the mountain itself is trying to tell us something. Speculations and rumors. These weird happenings around Mount Kailash have folks scratching their heads and coming up with some pretty wild ideas. Some believe it's not just a mountain, but a giant glowing battery of energy, like a spiritual hotspot, blasting out forces we can't even imagine. Others, more sciencey types, reckon the mountain itself is made of some crazy stuff. Or maybe it's got a magnetic field that's gone rogue, causing all this weirdness. Then there are the locals who whisper about Mount Kailash being a giant cosmic doorway, a portal to other worlds. Think like a cosmic jump rope, but instead of kids, it lets beings from who knows where zip between realities. They point to old stories and legends about UFOs and aliens hanging out around the mountain, using it as their celestial parking lot. Maybe these strange lights and weather patterns aren't just random. Maybe they're hints of something much bigger going on out there in the cosmos. Some folks who visited even swear they aged super fast while up there. They say their hair and nails grew in like 12 hours, which normally takes weeks. Sounds like the mountain's got some serious anti-aging cream hidden somewhere. Or maybe it's just messing with time itself. Who knows? That's the beauty of Mount Kailash. It keeps us guessing. Also, there's a reason Kailash is nicknamed unclimbable. Apparently, the only dude who ever made it to the top was this Tibetan Buddhist monk named Milarepa, way back in the 11th century. Everyone else? Well, let's just say the mountain has a way of discouraging visitors. Climbers have reported the peak straight up changing location on them, like they're all geared up, ready to conquer the summit, and suddenly, poof, the mountain's in a different spot. Talk about messing with your head. And if that wasn't enough, the trails around Kailash are notorious for vanishing too. One minute you're following the path, the next you're lost in a maze of rocks, wondering how you even got there. It's enough to make you question your own sanity. Some folks who've dared to climb have also dealt with some seriously bad weather out of nowhere. Blizzards rolling in, visibility dropping to zero. These aren't exactly ideal conditions for scaling a mountain. It's like Kailash throws up a big nope sign with a lightning storm whenever someone gets too close. And here's the creepy part. Some climbers who've been forced to turn back, well, they just never come back at all. Eerie, right? But hey, maybe the mountain's just protecting itself. After all, it's considered a holy site in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. Followers believe it's the gateway to heaven, a place where even the gods hang out. The four faces perfectly aligned with the compass directions, that's not a coincidence according to ancient texts. It's a connection between our world and the next. Even legends say the Pandavas, these epic heroes from Hindu mythology, achieved enlightenment while trekking Kailash. Though one of them did take a tumble before reaching the top. Guess even the best heroes can get a little lost sometimes, especially when a mountain's actively trying to trip you up. But with all that popularity comes a downside. The mountain and its whole vibe are at risk. It's like having a million fans moshing around a priceless antique vase. Eventually, the vase is gonna crack. The Chinese government, bless their hearts, are trying to be the bouncers in this situation. They've rolled up their sleeves and put together a whole plan to keep Kailash awesome for future generations. It's no small feat though. It's like walking a tightrope. Gotta respect the ancient traditions and religious beliefs, but also gotta make sure the environment around the mountain doesn't crumble. Think about it like protecting your great-grandma's favorite teacup. You gotta handle it with care, right? That's what the Chinese are doing with Kailash. They're throwing everything they've got at it. Stricter rules on littering and how visitors behave, even using fancy new tech to keep an eye on the environment and fix any damage. Basically, they're leaving no stone unturned, except maybe the real Mount Kailash, since nobody climbs that crazy thing. Addressing climate change. Conservationists are facing a significant challenge in the form of climate change, which is impacting the delicate alpine environment of the region. The rising temperatures, melting glaciers, and shifting weather patterns are posing a threat to the intricate balance of this high-altitude ecosystem. In response to this pressing issue, the Chinese government has joined forces with leading scientific institutions and environmental organizations to undertake extensive research and develop adaptive strategies aimed at mitigating the effects of climate change. A dedicated team of researchers has been assembled by the government to monitor the retreat of glaciers and study the complex network of alpine flora and fauna that form the ecosystem. This endeavor is a race against time, as it seeks to safeguard not only the physical integrity of Mount Kailash, but also the rich tapestry of life that flourishes in its shadow. However, the conservation efforts extend beyond purely scientific pursuits. The Chinese authorities have also acknowledged the vital role played by local communities and spiritual traditions in preserving the sanctity of Mount Kailash. In recognition of this, they have forged partnerships with indigenous groups and religious organizations, aiming to integrate traditional ecological knowledge and spiritual practices into their conservation strategies. These initiatives encompass various aspects, from incorporating sustainable practices into the pilgrimage circuit to educating visitors about the significance of respecting sacred sites. The ultimate goal is to foster a deep reverence for Mount Kailash and instill a sense of stewardship among all those who venture into its hallowed realm. Mount Kailash has been gaining popularity as a tourist destination, attracting visitors and pilgrims from all over the world. However, this surge in tourism brings with it a unique set of challenges. The influx of visitors has the potential to contribute to environmental degradation and disrupt the sacred atmosphere of the site. In response to these challenges, the Chinese authorities have implemented a comprehensive visitor management system. One of the key measures taken is the limitation of the number of tourists and pilgrims allowed to access the site at any given time. This controlled access not only helps alleviate the strain on the fragile ecosystem, but also preserves the sanctity of the pilgrimage experience. It ensures that devotees can embark on their spiritual journey without the intrusion of overcrowding, allowing for a more profound and meaningful experience. Thanks for watching, friends. Make sure you subscribe to this channel and watch another of our interesting videos before you leave.